Welcome everybody to today's WRLA webinar, Family Business Transitions, 3 Drivers of Success. WRLA would like to thank today's webinar sponsor, Fillmore Riley. With a seasoned team of lawyers, paralegals, and support staff, and over a century of experience, Fillmore Riley specializes in over 20 practice areas of the law and has the expertise to help you successfully address any situation. Right now, I'd like to invite Joanna Kasnus, partner at Fillmore Riley's, to bring greetings from Fillmore Riley. Joanna, if you have a chance, could you unmute yourself and we can see you? Hey,
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Jess. And I'd like to thank you guys for giving us the opportunity to be the sponsor. We have a longstanding relationship with you guys. For those of you who are not familiar with Fillmore Riley, we're based here in Winnipeg. We're a full service law firm other than criminal law. And we have a fairly extensive practice dealing with owner managed businesses in particular, and private planning, private wealth planning, succession planning, wills, trusts, estates, and tax. I'm a partner in our tax group, but I also do succession planning, reorganizations, trusts, wills, etc. And so, we have a fairly good sized group of unbiased but personable people who are quite experienced, and we do appreciate that when it comes to family planning and succession planning businesses, that you really can't separate the personal relationship aspect from the business aspect. And so we're quite sensitive to that, and we draw on that as much as our legal expertise to try to help our clients find solutions that are workable, sort of both from a relationship perspective and a family harmony perspective, but also legally, and with tax and family law and all of the other aspects combined. So I'm sure this presentation will be very valuable for all of you, and Fillmore would be more than happy to help any of you with your planning needs, whatever they might be.
Thank you so much, Joanna. And thank you, Fillmore Riley, for being a sponsor today. We really appreciate it. So before I introduce our speakers today, I want to just remind you that on the call is myself. I am Jessica. I am your trade show and events manager at the WRLA. Secretly in the background is my co-worker, Erin Lubinsky, who's member services and solutions manager. Both myself and Erin are going to be monitoring the questions and will help facilitate them at the end with our presenter. So just to let you know, this session is being recorded, and a copy of the recording will be sent out post-webinar and posted on our website. And all attendees today are also getting a copy of Tom Dean's book, Every Family Business, and we're going to get that mailed out probably beginning of next week. So you could probably expect them in your mail within the next 7 to 14 days. I also am excited that our board chair, Joel Siebert from Mountain View Building Supplies, is also here today. And Joel's going to be facilitating today's webinar with Tom. So just a quick few reminders for those who've never attended a webinar with us. To ask questions, you're going to use the chat function below or the Q&A function. So just type those questions in there. As I mentioned, Erin and I are watching them, and we'll hold them to sort of facilitate them at the end after today's session. I want to welcome Dr. Tom Deans. He is today's presenter. Dr. Tom Deans is the author of Every Family's Business. It's a best-selling family business book of all time, selected by the New York Times as one of the top 10 books business owners should read. So you're very lucky you are all getting that book. With more than 1 million copies sold in more than 100 countries, the book provides the framework for his public lectures and seminars and is part of the framework of today's session. Previously, Dr. Deans was the CEO of a large multinational family business and has worked in government relations, and has been the president of a railway. Tom has been featured in numerous magazines and journals, including Profit, Money Sense Inc., the Wall Street Journal, and the New York Times. With his family selling businesses for more than $100 million, prepare to unlearn everything you thought you knew about business and succession planning. Welcome, Dr. Deans. So at this time, I invite Joel and Dr. Tom Deans to jump on and take over.
Thank you very much. Great to be with you. Right on. So I guess we can jump right into this this interview here. Maybe we can begin this interview by you offering an overview of how transitions are going today Are business owners and their families in good shape right now?
Well, Joel, it is a great place to start. And I think, as we're sitting here in the middle of a pandemic, and trust me, I don't want to make this next hour about the pandemic, but we do have to just kind of reference the fact that it has really amplified the very best of family businesses and some of the challenges. And I always like to make it very clear right out of the gate that a lot of business owners don't even consider themselves family owned. In other words, they don't have a child working in the business, or there's no one related by blood or marriage working in the business. But I want to be very clear. That person, in the event of their death or incapacity, if they are incapacitated, often those shares will go to, guess who, Joel? Surviving family, spouses. I got to tell you, this definition of a family business, when you take that broader definition, 9 out of 10 firms in Canada are family owned and controlled. They are everywhere, and they are in every industry. It's not just your industry, but I mean, retail right across the board, manufacturing, import, export, agriculture. Family owned businesses are the most predominant form of ownership. And they are right now struggling with trying to really clearly articulate their exit. How is a business going to transition its voting shares? Those voting shares have to go somewhere. I don't know if you know this, Joel. The Egyptians tried to bury themselves with their gold and take it with them. It did not work out particularly well. At some point, every single business owner on this call today, at some point, their shares are going to go somewhere. And they're going to walk out the front door of their office one last day. And if I do my job well today, I'm going to give, hopefully, business owners on the call the inspiration to choose that day, to clearly pick that day. In other words, don't trip over that day. Don't let business and life happen to you. When we're talking about succession planning, we're talking about all the marbles. We're talking about a business owner's entire life's work. And I want business owners to feel like they can select that day, pick a path, and drive towards that day. And when they get there, celebrate it. There is a lot of business owners who are stuck when it comes to succession planning, exit planning, transition planning, call it whatever you want. I'm talking about their last day. I'm talking about where their business is going to go. They're struggling with it, and they're kicking the can down the road. They don't know where to get started. They don't know what the pieces are required, and they're struggling. How do we know? Because, are you ready for this? Only 20% of all businesses in Canada are ever sold. And those that don't sell and transition those voting shares to the next generation or to a surviving spouse, only 30% survive to the second generation. And of that 30%, are you ready for this? This is actually where the real wealth destruction takes place. Only 10% of the 30% will make it to the third generation. So stated differently, if we have a founder on the call today, they have a 3% chance of their grandchildren owning and operating their business. I like to say, listen, if you love to gamble, go to Vegas. The odds are better and the drinks are free. But giving your business to your kids via your estate because you're old is just, it's not working anymore. And I'll go into a little more detail on why that is, but that's a great place to start.
Awesome. Well, unlike the Egyptians, I wish them good luck on trying to bury me with the gold that I have in my yard right now that is spruce lumber, because I plan on selling everything. So the title of today's webinar is Transitioning Family Business Wealth. You've been sharing a contrarian message to business owners and their family for more than a decade. What's compelled you to write such a different book that's as old as business itself?
Well, I think it really is my own personal experience. So our family business story actually starts in the 1920s on the East Coast. My great-grandfather had a tire distribution business. My grandfather worked in that business with my great-grandfather, and he didn't love it. So that business was sold in the 1940s. My grandfather inherited. He started a chemical manufacturing business in his garage in Montreal. That business actually grew to be our largest family business. It moved in the 1970s. It was headquartered in Ontario. My father worked in that business. He did not love that business. That one was actually sold for over 100 million. My father had his own ideas. He started a plastics company in 1973, and that's the business that I joined as a second genner in 1999 at the tender age of 37. That's the business that I ran for 8 years as CEO, and that's the business that we sold on February 8th, 2007. Now, Joel, do you see any patterns in our family other than the fact that we can't keep a job?
I see a lot of family members joining and businesses morphing into something different out of what they started with.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And so what we have never done is gifted our businesses to our kids, which is not to say that we don't transition cash to our children and ask the next generation if they want to buy the shares. And it's been very interesting over the course of 4 generations. None of us have. We're actually founders. We actually give birth to entrepreneurs. Our kids have our own ideas. I now have a publishing company. I have 2 kids, 28 and 26, and I've asked them if they want to buy this publishing company that I started. And Joel, what do you think their answer is?
No way, man.
It's like, so 4 and out. And so when we sold our business in 2007, I agreed to stay and work for the new owners. I like to say I served a 6-month sentence for a crime I didn't commit. It was a brutal 6 months of my life. And I think anyone who's listening to this call, if they could close their eyes and picture selling to a strategic buyer, a competitor, that's what we did. We were number 2 in market share. We sold to number 3. And when they bought us, they became the new number 1. So there was only 3 of us in the marketplace, and we loathed each other. We hated each other. It was war. And so when we sold to number 3, because remember, strategics pay the most for businesses, but they're the hardest deal. The easiest deal is to sell to family, right? Sometimes you get paid, sometimes you don't get paid. The math is kind of funny. Right? It all works out in the wash. Just got to live long enough. Yeah, not with strategics. So I agreed to stay for 6 months. It was a really tough grind. The meetings that I used to chair, I wasn't even invited to. So there you are. Your employees know that you've made, money. You're underworked, overpaid. You're marginalized, and it's humiliating. And I think these stories get told over and over. And it's a reason why I think a lot of business owners do what they do. And that is, I'll give you a hint, Joel, when it comes to this subject. They do nothing. Absolutely nothing. And my favorite line in the book that I know you're mailing out to the folks on this call today, in every family's business, is that silence is the great destroyer of Canadian family businesses. It's not families that talk about this subject and how it will transition into who and under what conditions or at what price. It's families that make assumptions. There may be people, I would suspect there are people on this call, owners who think that their kids are going to buy their business, and next gens who think their parents are going to give it to them for free, and no one knows how to start the conversation. And that's really all that Every Family's Business, the book that I wrote, is trying to do. It offers 12 common sense questions, really just to help families start the conversation. There are no right or wrong answer to the 12 questions in the book. There is just clarity that comes to both parent and child, or clarity that comes to a business owner and their key employees. Remember, the 12 questions in the book really starts conversations with family members or key employees. It's basically trying to probe whether or not you've got a buyer in the business. Do you have a buyer in the house? And if the answer comes back from these 12 questions that you have neither key employees or family members who want to risk their capital to buy your business, and you're in your 70s, what do What are you doing? Do you know that the vast majority of business owners, and I know what I'm talking about because I do it myself, my father did it, my grandfather did it, my great-grandfather did it. When entrepreneurs make money after a couple of years of starting their business, what do? Do they pull it out and buy a Porsche? What do? We pump it back in, pump it back in, we pump it back in over and over and over, and we fund our capital expansions and we fund our inventory, we fund our receivables. We love doing this because we build under-leveraged balance sheets. So when the bank comes in, we smack them around. We used to interview our banker because we just hoarded our family wealth inside that operating business. And while it is fun to run a business with no leverage, in your 30s or 40s, that's fine. But when we move into our 50s and then our 60s and 70s and 80s, and we've got 80% of our personal net worth wrapped up in one business, one illiquid stock with no plan to monetize it, that is insane. Not only is it insane, but it is super stressful on business owners.
Well, I'm glad you started talking about these 12 questions. That segues into my next question for you. So you were CEO of a large family business and you transitioned that business. So what you're talking about isn't just theory, you've actually lived it. Your book offers like the 12 questions that you had mentioned. Can you give an overview of what some of these questions are?
Yeah, obviously we don't have time to go into all 12. And I should just mention right now that this book, look, I have a PhD, but this is not an academic book. The world did not need another book with million-dollar words to intimidate business owners and find another reason on why they shouldn't do a succession plan. This is a book actually written much like The Wealthy Barber. It's a book written about two people on a plane drinking scotch on their way to Barbados. And a little trivia question. You have to guess how many double scotches they have on this flight, but man, they get into it and they start confessing some of the things that they did well and some of the things that they had great regrets about in terms of the business and managing family relationships and preparing the business for sale. And so it's really an accessible book. So I don't have time to go into all 12, but I'll tell you that the real core of the questions really center around the shifting of control of the voting shares. A lot of people think that when we talk about succession planning, we're talking about starting our kids off on the factory floor or starting them off in the warehouse and then moving them upstairs into accounts receivable and then maybe into sales and giving them a little flavor and experience about all the different operational parts of the business. That is not what I'm talking about today. That's called management succession planning. That's a whole different book. I am talking about the transition of control. And I'll tell you, families, they'll talk about succession planning all day long, but they leave this one alone. This one is explosive. This one is dangerous. This one feels like it's going to rip the family apart because in many cases, you have family members that are in the business and some that are outside the business, right? And then the family's trying to figure out, well, what's fair? Is fair equal or is equal equal?
Fair is not.
Yeah, I can't tell you the number of times I've received emails from readers, business owners, where they've left the voting shares of their business to the child that's in the business through their estate, through their will, and they had an equal amount of cash outside the business. So the child outside the business got the cash, child inside the business got the business, both worth the same. Guess what? Sounds fair, doesn't it? Do you know that the child who got the business got a whopping tax bill? You know what those original founder shares are worth? The original shares are worth $1. Fast forward, what are those shares worth today? Everyone needs to answer that question. That is the starting place for understanding what kind of hill you're climbing with your succession plan. If your original shares are valued at $1 and now they're $78, that difference is subject to capital gains. On the last parent's death, right? Shares, say dad is the business owner. He dies. Guys, statistically, we die first. Shares go to surviving spouse, mom. Mom dies under the stress of trying to run a business maybe she doesn't know or understand. Then the shares come down to the kids in equal amounts. Because we're Canadian, we do this all the time. We often put our kids into business together as equal partners, which is insane. What do the kids outside the business want from their brother or sister inside the business? And I'll give you a hint, Joel. It rhymes with funny.
Money and fast.
And fast. Lightning fast. And of course, the kids outside the business, you know, they see that old family business and they see all that equipment and they see all that stuff. They figure it's worth tens of millions of dollars. There's never been a proper third-party valuation done of the business. So people just carry around ideas of what things are worth. And then they have inflated ideas, inflated expectations of what size of check their brother or sister should be writing to them. And then when that money doesn't come right away, what do the kids often get as well at that moment in time when those shares come down when mom dies? They often get a letter from CRA. And that letter from CRA goes something like this. We're sorry to hear about your loss. I'm just kidding. It doesn't say that. Joel, what it says is you kids who just got your parents' business for free from the estate, you owe us this, and it's the capital gains. And most of the kids, they don't have that free cash flow kicking around. So where do they go for the money to pay their personal tax bill for that free business? They reach inside the business and the business doesn't have it and the business fails. Remember that 30% survival rate? That 70% failure rate is largely as a result of that little scenario.
Yeah, for sure. So rather than delving into some of the questions or a number of the questions there, what are 3 things that stand out? Can you talk about some of the more memorable responses to a couple of your questions?
Yeah, so question number 2 and question number 3. Question number 2 really goes to the founder, the controlling shareholder, and it's very simple. So these are very simple questions. Simple does not mean easy. They're straightforward questions. And question number 2 is this. You, controlling shareholder, are you prepared to sell this business? Yes or no? Yes or no? Not sorta, maybe, kinda. Like, one day, will you sell this business? Are you prepared to sell it? And you would be shocked at the number of business owners who are like, no, I'll never sell this. This is my greatest legacy.
Yeah, I was going to say, so when you say that, when you ask that question, are you talking from a strategy standpoint, or are you mentally willing to separate yourself from this business?
The latter. So I'm not saying, are you going to sell it today? What I'm talking about is, this is not a call to action. Like everyone must, at the end of this webinar, go start pounding a for sale sign on the front line. That is not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is the methodology, the idea that one day you will sell, whether it's 30 years down the road. What I'm saying is, when you understand what succession planning is, you will understand that you will run a very different business today with the end in mind. But if the end in mind is, no, I'm just going to hang on to this business, and when I get to age 65, when I'm getting tired of risking my capital, when I get to a business at that age, I'm just going to keep it that size. I like that size. I don't want to keep risking capital. Listen, Joel, businesses get bigger or they get smaller. They don't go sideways. So I see this often in family businesses where the founder gets to a certain age and then tries to put the autopilot on, and bad things happen real quick.
Complacency.
So question number 2 is that's that question to the founder. Are you prepared to sell one day? Yes or no? Question number 3 is for the next generation or for the key employees. And that question goes like this. Are you prepared to risk your capital to buy this business with the view of acquiring control? Yes or no? No right or wrong answer. There are a lot of next gens who are hearing for the first time that their parents will never sell the business. They'll never sell it to them or to anyone else. In other words, their plan is to go to the oldest page in the playbook, which is, I gave you a hint before, it is
Passing it on.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just semi-retire from that retail location or for that manufacturing operation, head on down to Florida or Palm Springs, play some golf, come back in April, drive the kids crazy for 6 months till the snow flies. And that's the plan, right? The plan is to semi-retire, but hang on to the voting shares while your kids run and grow your business for you. Well, guess what, Joel? That plan actually did work pretty well on the farm, and it worked really well in retail operations back in the 1940s and 50s and 60s. But guess what? Back then, they had 7, 8, 9 kids. You had a pool, you had a talent pool. It was pretty possible that two or three. Well, now guess what? The 70s, the 80s, the 90s, we had 2 kids, and they went off and they got educated, and they're coming back, and now we're looking around, and they're not in the business. And guess what? That business owner, back in the 40s and 50s, they would have a heart attack at 72. Statistically, at age 72, men, business owners, would have a heart attack and die. And then the shares would go to mom. Statistically, she would last another 2 years, and then the shares would come down to the kids, and they were in their 30s and 40s, getting these businesses from their parents. Guess what? It's not working, Joel. We're living longer. We're living vastly longer. And it's causing also, and we have smaller families. To illustrate this point, let me share with you a very, very short story, super short. When my book, and everyone's going to get a copy of this book, Every Family's Business, when that book was released, I was doing a CBC radio phone-in show. And when you do these types of events, you generate a lot of email traffic. I get a phone call the next day from a business owner. And I'm on the phone, I'm piecing together, it's a very large business. And he said, look, we're a family in transition. Could you help us out? And I said, well, I'm not a consultant. I'm really a speaker and I'm an author. I do this full time. I travel all around the world sharing this message about the dangers of gifting your business to your kids. And, but he was really persuasive. And so I agreed, and I went to downtown Toronto. I was escorted to this incredible boardroom, oak panel boardroom. And then in shuffles this old guy. He's all hunched over, and he shuffles in, and he says, I read your book. And he starts to tell me about his business. And I said, look, hang on. Before you go much further, why don't you invite your son in, and we can have this conversation together? And he goes, I am the son. My 95-year-old dad will be here shortly. This is the modern family business in Canada. We have business owners. Okay, so the leading edge of the baby boomers, they turned 65 years old in 2011. So the leading edge is 75 years old. And they started businesses in this country like no other generation. There is $1 trillion sitting in the retained earnings of these family businesses. A lot of them with owners in their 70s, 80s, and 90-year-old owners.
Those are the good old days.
Yeah. And the family is just waiting for someone to die in order for the shares and the control to shift. And you've got kids in their 60s and 70s. They're not looking for conversations about purchasing their business they're just looking for conversations and have permission from their parents to retire.
Right. They're looking for control to sell immediately.
Yeah, so I just think that the whole subject of transitioning a family business often takes the sale off the table, and the consequences are really dire. And I think when you take that in combination with my earlier remarks about how hard it is to sell a business, and I'm not going to sugarcoat it, it was the toughest thing I ever did. It's emotional, it's hard work. You really come to understand very, very quickly that what the acquirer is purchasing is your free cash flow.
Yeah.
That's what they want. And that's expressed as EBITDA, earnings before interest, taxes, amortization, depreciation. That's what they want. Yeah. That is the free cash flow. And if you've got a really well-managed, well-organized and disciplined management team, and you've got maybe something else, some secret sauce, you'll give you a higher multiple of that free cash flow.
Yeah, you can't put a dollar value on your emotional connection to your business, that's for sure.
Yeah, I was really shocked at how emotional it was for me. I mean, I wasn't the founder of my father's business, but I still got caught up in that moment.
Well, you were part of the growth and the transition from what it was to what you made it. So, you know, there's a lot of sweat equity that goes into these businesses every day, and you can't monetize that. It's when someone's looking at buying, it's what's on paper. This is it.
This is it, exactly. And it's interesting. You just used a really fascinating word there, and that's sweat equity. And that's often a word that the next generation often uses. So when it comes to them buying the business, because remember, if they don't buy the business, they're going to have brothers and sisters to deal with, right? They're going to have brothers and sisters who are going to say, hey, listen, buddy, you just got something for free. And then Junior's going to go, it's not for free. I have sweat equity in this business. Yeah. And then the brothers and sisters go, buddy, the business is worth $18 million. What's your hourly rate? Like, there is a lot of loopy math, crazy math that goes on. And that's often why we find family businesses, siblings lawyering up and fighting in court because their parents have designed it that way. There's been no conversation. They haven't relied on their advisors to have family meetings, to bring transparency to this conversation and to whatever decision or whatever plan is agreed to, right? Most family next gens are going to find out what their parents' business succession plan is. Are you ready for this? Do you know where ground zero is? It's not the reading of a will. It's the funeral home. The funeral home. The funeral directors have to ask for a copy of the will because the executor has the legal authority to implement final wishes. So that's usually the moment in time where it's revealed that maybe only one or two of the kids have been selected as the executor, right? And that's so now you have grieving children finding out that they weren't selected as the executor and that their brother is going to get the business and they're going to get, left off, or they're going to get something less. It is a cocktail, a recipe for disaster. And that's really what the book is trying to avoid, getting out in front of this and helping families talk about this thing, talk about how this asset is going to transition, because it's not going to transition on its own.
And it doesn't have to be that ugly.
No, in fact, I think if you read the newspapers and you watch the news, and even if you watch Netflix long enough, there's family businesses make for great drama. Sure. It is the intersection of money and control and power and love, and it's just, and it's hard to detach and separate all those things. Some of the best novels and movies are based on family businesses, and it's the drama. But you're absolutely right. There are many, many families, and you have one in Winnipeg. I'll tell you where your association has head office. The Richardson family, I'll tell you, have done a remarkable job. But don't think that happened by accident. They, like the Rockefellers, invested heavily in process. They have advisors, they have family meetings, they have minutes, they have agendas. They discuss this stuff repeatedly because things are constantly changing. So, they work at it. And making money is hard. Just try keeping it. It's even harder. Or transitioning it is even harder. And I just think I think a lot of entrepreneurs think that that's the easy part. We'll make it and then it'll take care of itself. Well, it doesn't. We've all heard shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves. We know that, like that arc, right? Make it, hold it, blow it. The reality is not so true. There are many, many, many business owning families who prepare their heirs, who don't give their businesses to their kids. What they do is they sell those businesses and then transition the wealth. And the kids go off and do something that they're really passionate about. Maybe it's in a different industry.
Well, I'm from Alberta here, and so we're more on the make it and blow it immediately roller coasters. So, but if you could share 3 things that every business owner should do after this webinar, what would they be?
Well, first of all, you're going to get a copy of the book. There is no excuse not to read this book. It is a really super 1.5 hour, 2 hour read. Save it for a plane ride if you're going to get back onto planes soon. But it's a funny book. It's a fun book. And if you're a business owner, or if you're a next gen, or even if you're a key employee, you are in this book. So you will find the character, and this will resonate with you. Read the book, and then share the book. Just give that book to another family member. This book is completely useless, totally 100% useless, unless you give it to someone else and sit down and tackle the 12 questions. So in other words, there are no answers in the book, but there are 12 wickedly great on-target questions that I guarantee if a business owner has the courage to ask them, there is going to be nothing left to talk about. You're going to tackle all the big issues like compensation and the shifting of voting control and job descriptions and performance reviews and all the things that a lot of family businesses do a very poor job of. They sweep it under the carpet. They figure that everyone will it'll all just work out in the wash. And it's just fantasy. It just doesn't. And then I would say the next thing that a business owner should do after listening to this is, well, I'll tell you, get a will. Half of the people on this call today do not have a will. 12.5 million Canadian adults do not have a will, including half of all business owners. And then the other half that do have wills, 80% of those documents are badly outdated. Maybe your executor is dead. A lot of us, hey, listen, Bobby Kennedy in 1968, when he took that bullet in Los Angeles. Okay, that was a pretty tragic event for Americans. Good news is he had a will. Bad news, who do you think his executor was?
I don't know.
His brother.
Oh.
His brother assassinated 5 years early, never updated the will. Now, Bobby Kennedy wasn't just a lawyer, he was the Attorney General. Half of all lawyers in this country do not have a will. If you're a business owner and you don't have a will, you do not have a succession plan. The province in which you reside, the government, the provincial government, has a formula for dividing up your beautiful retail operation or your manufacturing operation according to the laws of Alberta or Saskatchewan or Ontario or Manitoba. And they're going to chop up that business along with your barbecue and your canoe according to the provincial formula. And I guarantee you, it's not going to be the way that you would divide your business. And I tell business owners all the time, if you just don't do that basic, then you will be remembered, just not fondly.
Well, that's awesome, Tom. I appreciate your time today. I'm good. At this point, I'm going to turn it back over to Jess. I saw some questions popping up here at the bottom, so if you want to take some time and answer some of these, that'd be great. Thank you very much.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks, Joel.
Thank you, Joel. Awesome. Well, thank you. And nobody wants the government to have your money, so get a will. So we had a few questions come in, but before we get started, I just want to remind everybody that this session is being recorded. I will send you guys out a direct link, and it's going to be posted on our website, so you can go back anytime and watch the link or send it to family members. And also, as Tom mentioned, the book will be mailed out to you in the next week or so. So you guys should get it in the mail. I don't know how Canada Post is doing. I think they're over the Christmas chaos, but so it should be like 7 to 14 days before you get it. Okay, so we did have a few direct questions that came in. So the 2 questions actually that came in, and just a reminder, chat function or Q&A to ask questions. I think these 2 questions kind of tie. So the first question was, I'm kind of hesitant to approach existing staff around my transition plan as I don't want them to panic about me selling. But also, my kids are not interested. How do I approach key employees with their interest?
I love that question. Here's a great way to do it. First of all, if you're not broaching the subject with your key employees, they're probably panicking. Listen, people are not dumb. People know that everyone is aging. Everyone's getting older. Everyone knows that a business owner at some point has to deal with the ownership question. So by not dealing with it is actually a source of stress. Not having a contingency plan, not saying to your key employees, listen, if I get hit by a bus, never mind just dying. If I get hit by a bus or something catastrophic, or I end up with COVID, I end up on a ventilator, I want to know that we have a really good contingency plan, a good succession plan here, not just for the management, but for the ownership. And here's how I would broach that subject. I would invite a key employee, not a group of employees. I'm talking key employee, that kind of employee that if they got hit by a bus, you would feel it on your balance sheet. Key being essential. I would invite that person into your office, close the door and say, hey, Mary, look, I'm not having this conversation with very many people. In fact, I'm only having it with one other key employee. And I've been doing a lot of reading on the subject of business succession planning, and I really want to do a better job. And I just want to ask a question. I just want to know, in the event of my death or incapacity, would you be interested at some point in buying this business? And by the way, there's no right or wrong answer. Like if you say that you don't want to buy this business one day, I'm not going to think less of you. Like this part is important. I'm not going to think less of you as an employee. I just understand that, it takes capital, it takes risk. It doesn't mean that you're not a phenomenal CFO or vice president of sales. So I would start that conversation. And then I would say to them, look, it also occurs to me that if I do sell this business, say we get an unsolicited offer from a competitor, I can't sell this business without you. I need your help. And so I've been doing lots of reading, and I need to get in place for you a proper employment contract. And specifically an employment contract with a clause that says that in the event that we're sold, that you promise to stay and help through the negotiations and to stay after the sale to transition the business into the new owner's hands. And in return for that loyalty, I would like to give you, and I'll give you a hint, it rhymes with funny.
What? Would that be money?
Oddly enough, people get really switched on.
Yeah.
Do you see how we took an awkward subject about, oh my God, if I talk to my employees about selling this business, they're going to bolt for the door and then I'll have nothing to sell. And how we flip that and say, no, if something happens to me or we do get this incredible offer, I want you to participate in some of the juice.
Mm-hmm.
Now, guess what? Now when someone wants to talk to you about buying your business and they request a meeting and you've got your two key employees in the room, they're like, do you know that buyers are very clever? They know how to negotiate haircuts and discounts. And they usually do it by driving wedges between owners and key employees. So when you show up to that first meeting, it's like, there's no secrets. We are super tight. We've thought this through. We've done our homework. We know how to run a business, scale a business, grow a business. And yes, we know how to sell a business. There's no secrets. Oh, listen, that's how you get a 7 multiple EBITDA as opposed to a 3.
That's actually amazing advice too, because it really shows your strategy so that you are a valuable business to potential buyers. So I just wanted to remind people too that the questions can be sent directly to me if you want to be anonymous and you don't want others to see them. So don't worry, we won't use names or anything like that. I did have another question with regards to, well, this is kind of funny. What if I don't plan to retire? What advice are you given there?
Okay, so that's actually a phenomenal question. I'll tell you why. There's a lot of business owners who equate their employment with their ownership. They mix it up. Let's imagine this webinar is over. We pack it up and we go across the street and we work for Coca-Cola. We walk in, we get hired. We walk into that Coca-Cola building. We work a good day's work. We trade our time for money. We get paid. We're walking out the door at the end of that day. We don't think we own Coca-Cola. There's no illusion there. That's employment income. So embedded in that question is this idea that if I sell, I must stop working. Why? How about you sell, and if you enjoy working, here's a crazy idea, you keep working. And maybe you even keep working, but working a different way. Maybe you only want to work 3 days a week. Maybe you want to take Mondays and Fridays off. Maybe you want July and August off entirely. Maybe you just want to do the cherry pick, the very best parts of your job. That is a big, big problem. There's a lot of people business owners who never sell or transition control of the voting shares to their family, sell to their family because they figure, oh my gosh, yeah, I'm irrelevant. I'll get kicked to the curb. I'll have to go home and watch Oprah, sit on the couch with my wife in the afternoon. I'll be the boss of no one. Yeah, it's hard.
Yes. That's funny. That's a great answer. So I've had two questions that are sort of similar. One was like, I don't have a successor. How do I find a buyer? And the other question was like, how do I find opportunities and strategies to find buyers for my business?
Yeah, no, so super, super question. Listen, here's your only options. You can do nothing, die at your desk. Yucky. It's yucky, right? So if you want to sell, here's your options. Sell to a family member, sell to a key employee or group of employees, sell to a strategic buyer, a competitor, supplier, customer, someone in your value chain. They're all called strategics. Or sell to a financial buyer, like a private equity firm. That's it. There's actually what makes this subject so easy is that no one is inventing new ways to exit. Those are the only options. So the really smart buyers, what they do is they cultivate all of those options concurrently. So they're talking to their kids about selling it to them, talking to their key employees about selling to them, talking to the strategic buyers, talking to private equity firms, all at the same time. Mm-hmm. Not because they want to sell tomorrow, but because when that day comes, they pull that lever and all of that time that was invested in talking about this day, you all of a sudden have multiple people bidding from different parts, right? Mm-hmm. What happens? Much like selling a home, when you have multiple people bidding for your business, what do you suppose happens to the price? Up, and away. What do most business owners do? They pick one track and they say, I'm selling to my kid, I'm selling to my key employee. Mm-hmm. And then fast forward 3, 5, 7, 15 years, they get to that promised day and someone pivots and changes their mind, and then the plan falls apart.
Okay, so this is sort of a follow-up question to that someone has asked. If we have a competitor interested, how do I know they're not just trying to steal my contacts and my client lists? What do you recommend to sort of pad that to make sure the conversation is a real conversation?
Right. I know this industry is profiting wildly from this pandemic as do-it-yourselfers like myself go out back and build a fence. Yeah, guess what? This is not a do-it-yourself project. Please promise me if there's just one thing you do, never mind 3, if there's one thing you do is do your research. Find a good business broker or a good mergers and acquisition specialist or good investment banker. By the way, those 3 words, business broker, investment banker, mergers and acquisition, they mean the same thing. Mm-hmm. These are just people, professionals who get businesses ready for sale and then run a competitive bid process. And trust me, there are so many moving parts. Do not try to do this on your own. You will just mangle. People try to save on fees. Oh my God. You don't even know what you don't know. I'll give you a very, very short story. I know some people in your industry who are doing what are called roll-ups. They're buying fairly small firms. And you know what they do? They'll often go out to dinner with they call them the target. They go out with the target and they take them for dinner and they say to the target, hey, Bill, look, I just want to get to know you tonight. I don't even want to, I don't want to talk business or numbers. I just want to, like, who are you? And I want you to get to know a little bit about me. And they'll say, so Bill, tell me, do you play golf? And Bill goes, I love golf. I love it. And then the mergers guy says, well, how many rounds do you play? And Bill goes, I don't know. I play a couple industry events, a couple of tournaments, and I don't know, only 6, 7, but I love the game. Do you know what Bill has just done? He has just destroyed the value in his business. The mergers and acquisition guy, the business broker, whoever it is, the guy who has identified that target. If Bill had a really great company, the right answer would be, well, I played 72 rounds of golf last year. I was hardly at the office and hardly anyone noticed. Do you know what that says to the buyer? I have management systems. I have key employees. I have performance reviews, job descriptions. I have built and organized a business that is durable, that has recurring revenue, that has great deep bench talent, right? That other guy that answered it the other way, he's made the business all about himself. And guess what? When he goes to sell the business, if he's successful, if he's lucky enough, he'll never be able to leave the building because he is the business.
Right.
Yeah, it's
okay. That's interesting. And I think to your point about having the key three individuals, having all three on your team, so to speak, your banker, your lawyer, your broker, it's probably good to have resource wise to pull on all of them. Correct?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, sellers want to sell shares. Buyers want to buy assets. You can have an asset sale or a share sale. Like there's just a lot of moving parts. But the part that will blow people away is that intangible, soft, emotional, letting go, saying goodbye to the employees that helped build that wealth and that huge check that someone just wrote for you. Like there's a lot of guilt and remorse and sadness, and you feel like you're attending your own funeral when you're walking out the door. Like I did it. It's an out of body experience, and then time moves on, and you realize that in fact, there's more to life than business, and there's something else waiting. And if there isn't something else waiting, if there isn't, and this is a challenge to the business owners on the call, that if you have nothing more compelling than just running your business, you can read all the books in the world, you'll never leave. You will literally die at your desk.
Boots on.
Boots on.
Boots on.
So what I say to business owners is, you know what? When you were young, you had time, but you had no money. As you're moving into your 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, you have money, but you have no time. You're still running your business. When you sell, indulge in a fantasy where you have both time and money. It is a phenomenal moment in time where we can do some of our best work. And by our best work, I don't mean selling more lumber. I mean, maybe playing the violin, teaching a MBA course, writing a book. Just don't write a book on family businesses. It's a very crowded marketplace, very low margins. But something is waiting there for someone, volunteering or starting a charity. Like,
yes.
It should be an exciting period of time. And often we were the largest employer in our town. And when we sold, we made the front page of our local newspaper. And when I came out of a local bank, my bank branch, I was stopping an acquaintance. I said, I read the newspaper. You know what his first question to me was?
Can I borrow some money?
No, he said, are you going to be okay?
Oh.
Are you going to be okay? We've just sold for a 10 multiple EBITDA.
It's almost like a death in the family then.
Definitely, like something must have been broken or something must be wrong. I have to write this book. I have to write a book that shifts the narrative away from the sale of the business being this sad, dark day to the most incredible day of my life when someone slid that check across the boardroom table in this law office. And it literally didn't just change my father's life and my life, but the lives of two generations that haven't even been born.
Wow.
And that is the kind of moment that was when you realize that life would never be the same. And that is an extraordinary moment. And whereas still some people would say, well, but that's your legacy. You lost your legacy. It's like, I didn't lose my legacy. My legacy is not a plastics company. My legacy is my children that will receive capital, cash, living gifts that they can go off and start their own businesses that they're passionate about. And then as I was doing the research for the book, I realized that in fact, businesses don't even last. Not just our business, but of the 100 largest firms in America in 1900, only 16 were in business in the year 2000.
Wow.
That's 4 generations.
Wow.
84% failure rate. Businesses. So when I say, listen, your business is not your legacy, it's not a commentary on whether or not you're an entrepreneur, you're a good, hardworking, honest individual. I'm saying your business, it just won't last. They just don't. And moreover, your business is not your legacy because people won't remember you as the founder. Let me ask you a question. Who is the founder of Coca-Cola?
Oh gosh, I don't know. Good question. Nobody knows.
Don't feel bad.
Some pharmacist selling cocaine-laced drinks or something on the road or something like that.
Very close. It was a pharmacist.
Yeah.
It was not Dr. Pepper, though. When I'm doing, like a year ago, when I was doing live events and I had 1,000 people in my audience, I could ask who the founder of Coca-Cola was, and I would get the exact same answer. Crickets. No one knew.
Yeah.
That is not just a random company. That is the third most valuable consumer brand in the world, and no one knows. No one right now is even Googling it on this call.
I'll have to do that after.
Now think about your lumber operation. I am not diminishing your hard work and what you've accomplished, but remember this: when you set out to create your business, you didn't set out to create a legacy. You set out to make money. Don't forget that.
Right.
And just because you have made money doesn't mean that the purpose of a business has changed.
Interesting. And that's a real shift in perspective, I think, for a lot of people, is shifting your perspective. I just want to remind people you could still have a few more minutes to ask some questions below. I have another question. Well, I have two questions here. First of all, should you own your business as a sole proprietorship or a corporation? Is that something you can answer?
Yeah, certainly I have a bias towards a corporation because I just think, there's different tax treatments and different write-offs for different arrangements. But I just think if you're serious about business, then you want to have share capital. You want to have the ability to sell something, and it's very difficult. Sole proprietor, actually, what you're selling is you.
Okay.
So really, if you're thinking about my message, it really is actually about building businesses that are not dependent on you.
Okay. So the next question is, when do I start preparing my business for this transition? Or it was probably yesterday you were supposed to start, but when does a business start preparing for this transition?
The day after you incorporate.
Okay. So
what I'm saying is, succession planning is just not a day in your life when you're old. What I'm saying is, and it's in the book, that succession planning is very much, it's an ideology, it's a thought process, it's a mental space. What I'm talking about is building a business with the end in mind. I don't prescribe on when that end is, whether it's 3 years or 3 months or 30 years. I don't care. But I want you to understand that whoever buys your business is going to be looking at least 5 years backwards. They're going to be looking at 5 previous years of history.
Right.
And to really, so at the minimum, it's going to take longer than you think. Very rare does a business sell itself in under a year.
Okay.
3 to 5 is very typical. And if you really want to understand what I'm talking about, building a business with the end in mind, and what succession planning is, it's not just about wills and shareholder agreements and these cold, boring documents. Listen to this very short story. 6 months before we sell our business, we're negotiating with what we think is going to be our buyer, and it did turn out to be our buyer. And we're driving towards a 10 multiple EBITDA. Okay. I still have a business to run. We have another facility down in St. Louis. I'm traveling with my sales guy. We're going to visit our largest customer. We stop at a Starbucks. I order a small coffee, costs $2. My sales guy orders a Venti. I don't know. It's like an enormous cup of coffee with whipped cream and drizzle and things hanging out. I can't even describe. It's $8. Okay. I got to spend the next half an hour watching my sales guy sip $80 out of my wallet. How am I possibly going to normalize my balance sheet for coffee? That is $80 coming out of my sale price. Starting to get a feel for what succession planning is?
Yeah.
A lot of business owners don't know what they don't know. And it is all about free cash flow and really curtailing expenses and building an income statement and a balance sheet many, many years before you're going to sell, so that there is that history of prudence and frugality, which is going to show up as cash in your pocket.
Excellent. That's good advice. And I think this is going to be our last question. We're just wrapping up. And this is a great last question. How do you know when the right time to transition or sell is? How do you know?
Okay. You know what? It's a good question. And it's in the book. The day when your sales guys say, listen, we need to expand our retail locations. We're just too busy. We need to hire more staff. or for the manufacturers on the call, listen, we need to bang another addition on. We need to add another line, a production line. We are just, our deliveries are way out. Our service sucks. We're losing business. It's that day where the owner goes, oh God, I love the size of my current business. Like why do we have to grow? The day a business owner feels uneasy about risking more of their own money or reinvesting last year's profits to fund their growth, the day that feels uncomfortable, that's the day you should sell. Something is bothering you.
Okay.
Something is leading you to second guess the danger of doing that. Listen to your gut.
Okay.
Listen to it. It's valuable information. So in the case of my father, I was buying shares in my father's business 7 years before I joined as an employee based on a third-party valuation. After doing that for 5 years, he put me on the board of directors. Then 2 years later, he hired me as CEO. So I was a shareholder first, a director second, and an employee third. We do it all backwards, I continued to buy shares. And then one day, he's asking me these questions. By the way, these questions, the 12 questions in the book, they're not my questions. I have shamelessly monetized my family's intellectual property. Absolutely. We're looking for royalties. It's another conversation. But I got to tell you, I pivoted. I said no one day. I could see that that China was a risk to the plastic industry. We either had to become $1 billion company or sell. Like that, we were just too small.
Right.
And so that was okay. So we shifted. We had no buyer in the house, no family member buyer. So we shifted and we both became sellers. And we started to look outside. And that took us 5 years to monetize that business.
Well, I think that's great advice too, because I think your description of a gut feeling and that kind of stuff is something people ignore sometimes as well. So it's great advice. And I want to say thank you so much for being here.